Da Dang. Chapter 12. Feeling drowsy, Xiaoyulo supported his forehead with his hand, trying to prevent his head from drooping and falling asleep. His surroundings were filled with noise, a cacophony of intermittent shouting, cursing and the incessant crowing of roosters. As he struggled to stay lucid and not succumb to his drowsiness, Liao Jixiang's face appeared on his mind. It was snow-white, bright, and fair with slightly parted lips and looking up at him. Occasionally, his lips thinned with his eyebrows drew together. Suddenly, a cool hand pressed hard on the back of his neck and gripped tightly. Xiaoyulo jolted awake. He turned around to find Tu Yao wearing his brocade uniform. Tanhua Xie, Tu Yao leaned close to his ear amidst the noise. Why aren't you playing? Xiaoyulo looked towards the center of the crowd where a circle of bamboo fence was located and which was surrounded by many officials in informal robes. Any one of them there had a higher rank than him. Inside the circle were two gamecocks whose feathers around the neck all stood up, flapping their wings. They fought up and down with blood dripping from their claws and feathers, amidst the passionate cheers of the crowd. I don't know the game, Xiaoyulo replied honestly. And I don't have the money. Tu Yao smiled amiably at him and reached into his sleeve, pulling out a silver note. Take this for playing, he said. Xiaoyulo didn't accept it, he didn't even look at it. Tu Yao observed his stubbornness and said, It's not me who's offering you this money, it's Du Gongzheng. Upon hearing Zhang Xian's name, Xiaoyulo stood up immediately. It's already past midnight, when will Du Gong arrive? There was something that Xiaoyulo wanted to discuss with Zhang Xian, and Tu Yao could tell. As for what exactly that something was, Tu Yao also more or less knew what it was about. It was most likely related to the last banquet at Lingfu Temple where Zhang Xian tried to win him over to his side. Looked like Zhang Xian had failed. Tanhua Xie, Tu Yao pocketed the silver note. As an official, one must be able to assess the situation. You've been studying for half your life, so naturally you should be shrewder than me. Since they were already discussing it, Xiaoyulo wanted to directly clarify his stand but Tu Yao wouldn't let him. If you're telling me about your attitude, so be it. But don't ever mention it in front of Du Gong. Xiaoyulo still wanted to speak but Tu Yao coldly interrupted him with a suppressing air. Du Gong doesn't possess a good temper. This is a threat. Xiaoyulo held back his feelings and sat down. Tu Yao patted him heavily on the shoulder and walked around the cockpit to place a bet. Suddenly, a burst of cheers erupted from the crowd. A rooster had won. It jumped onto the tallest bamboo strip of the bamboo fence, flapping its wings proudly. The other rooster, however, suffered numerous open wounds and was already laying dead in the winner's shadow. These people are nothing but a group of ghosts. Xiaoyulo looked on impassively. It was already midnight, with clouds so thick that the moon was completely shielded by them. The candlelight was flickering in the wind and within the light, Xiaoyulo could observe fresh blood, dead roosters, and his colleagues, howling with obscene frenzy like beasts let loose. Xiaoyulo couldn't help but shudder. Presently, several men in servants' outfits hurriedly entered from the moon gate, stretching their necks as they shouted, Du Gong is here. Zhang Xian arrived accompanied by Qi Wan. Xiaoyulo and the crowd bowed in unison to pay their respects. Zhang Xian had invited Qi Wan purely on a personal level this time, so the arrangements were all made according to the style of his home. Like the clouds covering the sky, the servants and attendants quickly occupied the courtyard where the cockfighting was held. Some of them were offering tea, some were dusting the chairs, and some only came to stand on both sides of the courtyard, simply because they made a pretty sight. These two were the real Da Dang, whose slightest movements would require the immediate attention of so many. It was widely known that eunuchs all enjoyed cockfighting. As soon as Qi Wan saw the bloody rooster standing on top of the bamboo strip, he was fascinated by it and unable to make another step. This one is great, Laoju. Zhang Xian returned a proud smile, if Sangur likes it, take it with you. While speaking, he habitually glanced across the entire scene. The moment he spotted Xia Yulu, he raised his eyebrows slightly. It's a northwest breed which had fought and won 100 battles. A gentleman does not take what's not his. Chi Wan strode around the rooster, examining its comb, beak, and wattle, and find that all were perfect. With his thick fingers, he absent-mindedly flicked the rooster's dark, emerald-green tail feathers, but this one is no proper gentleman. Zhang Xian immediately ordered his men, cover its eyes and get it ready for Mr. Qi. Mr. Qi and Lord Qi differed by only one word, but their meanings were widely disparate. Qi Wan couldn't help but feel pleased, and out of admiration, he assisted Zhang Xian to roll up his sleeves. "Laoju, you never played with us. What's going on today?" Hearing his words, Zhang Xian extended his hands, displaying one gemstone ring on each of his hands. On the left hand was an opal ring, and on the right hand was a ring with tourmaline. Men typically wore no bracelets, but he went out of the norm and wore a small gold bracelet carved with crow patterns and embedded with amber. Every time he moved his arm, the bracelet shimmered in the light. "Sangur," he held Chi Wan's hand in his, "you know my temper. If I fight, I'll fight with all my strength. But if I'm kind to someone," eagerly and sincerely, he held Chi Wan's hand and led him to the seat at the head of the table. "I'll be genuinely generous." As soon as they settled down, a long row of servants approached, each holding a small folding fan in their hands. If these were Zhang Xian's meeting gifts for Chi Wan, then they were undoubtedly shabby, but Zhang Xian sat down confidently in his commanding officer's chair. "I suppose Liao Jixiang had definitely sent you some of the most precious antiques. I don't like to follow the crowd, brother. Take a look and see if you like them." The servants simultaneously unfolded the fans, all containing detailed gongbai erotic paintings on the fan surface, which filled their sight with ample flesh. "Whoa!" Chi Wan exclaimed, getting out of his seat out of the excitement that he couldn't contain. He walked down from left to right, examining each scene. One fan had a man with several women, and some had one woman with several men. Their facial expressions and movements were exquisite, not to mention that even their private parts were meticulously drawn in detail. "Laoju, how did you?" "That's right, Sangur." Zhang Xian took a quick sip of tea. "The first 3 paintings are Qiu Ying's work, and the rest are Tang Yin's." "Excellent." Chi Wan slapped his thigh, his eyes shining exuberantly. "If I take one of these to Lianzalane to show off, it'd be fantastic." "How absurd." Xia Yulu despised this group of people from the bottom of his heart. Then, recalling how Liao Jixiang wanted to set him up with a mistress, he found it understandable. Eunuchs cannot escape the habits of eunuchs, regardless of how proud or knowledgeable they were. A servant brought forth a bowl of steamed eggs to Zhang Xian. He seemed to have a habit of having late-night snacks. After taking a sip, Zhang Xian looked up and saw Xia Yulu. "Get a bowl for Tanhua Xia, too," he instructed, and took another sip. "Get him more green onions," he reminded them with great care. Xia Yulu and Zhang Xian were both northerners, and it was difficult to get garlic or green onion in Nanjing. Transporting a handful of chopped green onions from Huibei to Nanjing made it not much cheaper than that bowl of eggs. Everyone could tell that Zhang Xian was particularly favoring Xia Yulu. However, the more he favored him, the more uncomfortable Xia Yulu felt. "Thanking Du Gong for the kindness, but this one is not hungry," he said. Zhang Xian made a casual joke with him. "Whether you're hungry or not, this one decides." Since these two were conversing, Xia Yulu wanted to take this chance to speak his mind right away, so he got up from the corner and slowly moved forward. Presently, Chi Wan's thoughts were all on the erotic fans. Just as Xia Yulu approached, he heard Zhang Xian chatting with Chi Wan in a casual manner. "Sangur, don't you find something odd with Liao Jixiang cutting down the trees?" Hearing that name made Xia Yulu's body instantly tense up. "What?" Chi Wan was holding the fans and examining them, so he took Zhang Xian's question indifferently. "This is obviously an attempt to sow discord." Xia Yule was extremely nervous. He was very concerned for Liao Jixiang. Qi Wan was by right working under Lao Zuzong, yet he came to attend Zheng Xian's banquet. How could he not have any ulterior motives? Coincidentally and also unfortunately, the bowl of steamed eggs was served at this moment. Qi Wan's eyes followed the servant serving the dish and saw Xia Yule. He spat, "You lowly being. Who allowed you to come so close?" Hey, brother," Zheng Xian acted like a parent protecting his child, pointed to Xia Yule and said, "He's with me." Qi Wan let it pass when he heard that Xia Yule was Zheng Xian's underling. Obviously, he didn't take note that this lowly 6th-rank official was exactly the miserable soul kicked out from Beijing by his Lao Zuzong. "By the way," he asked Zheng Xian, "you have a Yang society here? I heard it's stirring up trouble." /Note, Yang Society is a faction established by government officials who were opposed to the eunuch faction / Indeed, there's such a thing, Zheng Xian signaled to Xia Yule with his eyes, indicating that there was no need to panic and he could have his steamed eggs. "It's not that bad." "Who's the leader?" Zheng Xian suddenly smiled, "The Minister of War, whom you saw at Liao Jixiang's banquet last time." "Him," Qi Wan remembered, then asked in a foreboding tone, "Who else are there?" "Several deputy ministers and directors under him." Zheng Xian asked acutely, "What's the matter?" Qi Wan paused briefly before replying, "This month, probably in the next few days, they might cause trouble." Zheng Xian laughed heartily, revealing his white teeth. He appeared slightly drunk, but that didn't make him look any less handsome. "Just a bunch of scholars. What can they do? To Lao Zuzong, to you and to me, they can compose some articles and even submit a batch of memorials. Then we shall also write. What should we be afraid of?" Zheng Xian propped one leg on the footstool, appearing like a man trained in kung fu. "Let's not think that we have no one. If they are forming some nonsense literary society, so will we," he said while pointing at Xia Yule. "Let him be the leader." Xia Yule was so scared that he couldn't even hold the spoon. He trembled with apprehension and listened to Qi Wan's reply. "I'm just worried that they will begin to take sides." Qi Wan tapped the table with his strong fingers. "If it gets too big, and the society becomes a political party, that won't end well. Let them take their sides." Zheng Xian was fearless. "Well, it happens that I just want to see who's with him and who's with me." Passing the peak of his excitement, he calmed down. "Hey, Sangur, where did you get this information?" Qi Wan knew he was going to ask, so he smiled and gestured. Zheng Xian was surprised. "From the Eastern Depot? How come I don't even know the news from the Eastern Depot, and you know already?" Qi Wan leisurely took a sip of tea. "Well, the information still travels faster in Beijing," he whispered, as if trying to imply something. "Brother, no matter which party you belong to, if you are staying in Nanjing, you would only remain on the periphery." Zheng Xian's expression changed. Qi Wan smiled and stood up, and joined in the cockfighting with some smart lad. Xia Yule hurriedly approached and called out, "Du Gong." Without a word, Zheng Xian immediately cast a fierce look towards him. Some things would always cause detrimental effects regardless of how it was phrased. Yet since he had already made up his mind, Xia Yule was determined to tell the truth straightforwardly. "This one has a cheap spirit, so I can't withstand Du Gong's help and guidance." Xia Yule was fully prepared to suffer some sacrifices in achieving his goal. However, Zheng Xian frowned and pondered on it for a long time before he eventually understood what he meant. "Don't disturb me," he waved his hand irritatedly. "Let's talk about it another day." But Xia Yule couldn't wait any longer. He took one step closer. His shabby official's robe was already touching the hem of Zheng Xian's robes with his rank badge. Everyone has his own aspirations. This one begs Du Gong to have mercy and not force my hand. Only then did Zheng Xian look at him seriously. As he studied Xia Yulo's face, he suddenly laughed. Force you? What did I force you to do? Xia Yulo was left speechless. There was almost no distance between them as he stared dumbly at Zhang Xian. Last time, in Lingfu Temple. Aha, Zhang Xian was contemptuous, that unique gorgeous air came back to him. He opened his fingers and pressed hard on the egret rank badge on Xia Yulo's chest, grabbing him by the fabric and pulling him closer. I gave you a tiny bit of power and now you think you can be in charge. Xia Yulo felt like he was trapped between the beaks of a fierce bird of prey. He had considered the potential consequences of straightforwardly turning Zhang Xian down, a demotion, a penalty, or even decapitation. But he never expected to be put on the spot in this way, which was genuinely embarrassing. Du Gong, he gently pulled Zhang Xian's hand. Yet the hand was surprisingly strong and the gemstone rings it wore were cold as ice. If someone sees it? Am I afraid of people seeing it? Zhang Xian's face was just an inch away and Xia Yulo could clearly see the wrinkles under his eyebrows from his lavish indulgent lifestyle. For some reason, he suddenly recalled Liao Jixiang's eyes that were clear and cautious, with just a little bit of an ambiguous yet intimate appearance. Suddenly, Zhang Xian loosened his grip. He flicked his fingertips and pushed Xia Yulo away and spoke as if to himself, indeed. How can I get the best fortune after just one draw? A smile slowly formed on his face and his long finger softly brushed against the tiny egret rank badge on Xia Yulo's chest. Even Liu Bei had to pay 3 humble visits to the thatched cottage for Zhuge Liang. Xia Yulo didn't understand what he meant for a moment. Best fortune? Is he talking about me? Let's not hurry. Zhang Xian looked at him half affectionately and half threateningly. Chun Chu, there's a long time ahead of us. A cold sweat broke out on Xia Yulo's back and chest. He didn't expect Zhang Xian to be so unreasonable. Feeling reckless, he even wanted to provoke his anger once and for all. Yet at this moment, quite a commotion was observed from a distance. In a blink of an eye, a junior eunuch hastily came in. He was one of Qi Wan's men. Before he could approach his master, a tall man in an elaborate robe followed closely behind the junior eunuch and entered without invitation. It was Mei Aza. Xia Yulo immediately withdrew from Zhang Xian's side and hid among cockfighters, afraid that Mei Aza would spot him here and accidentally inform Liao Jixiang of it. In fact, the one who should be hiding was Qi Wan. Liao Jixiang would definitely be unhappy if he knew about him attending Zhang Xian's banquet. If Liao Jixiang reported it to the Lao Zuzong, the situation would prove to be awkward for Qi Wan. Yet after all, these important people had been through numerous dire circumstances. Although Qi Wan was taken aback, he maintained his calm composure. It was Zhang Xian who pinched his temple and spoke first. Qi Gur, I'm at a loss for words. Where did you get your information? Mei Aza strode straight to the front with the manner of a confident man, and ordered Zhang Xian's men to add a chair next to Qi Wan. He respectfully addressed Qi Wan as San Gur, and lifted his robe to take a seat. How did you know that we are here? Zhang Xian strained his body to look at Mei Aza out of his slitted eyes, across Qi Wan's overweight body. Well, never mind. You will do anything for Liao Jixiang anyway. Mei Aza showed no response, but presently Qi Wan spoke in a serious tone. Judging by Lao Qi's capabilities, if at any time he is willing to think for himself, he could at least become a eunuch in charge of taxes. Zhang Xian, feeling frustrated by Mei Aza's loyalty towards Liao Jixiang, chimed in, how did you end up enchanted by that boy? Mei Aza responded naturally. He is oblivious to what's going on outside his own household. If there are any changes, I have to keep an eye for him. He was surely referring to Liao Jixiang, so the sentence was directed to Qi Wan, and everyone was aware of it. Qi Wan fell silent for a moment, then suddenly burst into an odd chuckle. Lao Qi, San Gur knows you well. You have your own thoughts but you won't stir up trouble. Amongst these young ones, you are the most sensible. Now that Chi-wan had made his stand clear, Mei Azha could say nothing else. Sangur, I have no other intentions. I'm just dropping by for our Laoba to give the impression that the weaving and sewing bureau is still going strong. Chi-wan didn't reply. Suddenly, he slapped and exclaimed, "Ah!" He smacked his lips and appeared to be excited. Back in the day, His Majesty loved little Mei's somersaults and Miss Zheng's spinning dance the most. So, Lao Chi, his eyes cast an ominous stare towards Mei Azha, and uttered word by word, "Sangur wants to see your somersaults." Years ago, the little Mei who performed somersaults was merely a child. Now, he was referred to as Lord Mei by everyone. Chi-wan was intending to embarrass Mei Azha in public. Yet no one expected to see Mei Azha showing no hesitation at all. He stood up right away and removed his outer robe. His body stood tall and straight as a spear. On his chest he wore a leather vest with a small knife in each of his left and right pockets, an obvious look of someone seasoned on the battlefield. Upon seeing the knives, Zheng Xian and Chi-wan were both stunned. Mei Azha shrugged and said nonchalantly, "Just a habit I developed in Gansu a few years back." He then started to perform somersaults in an agile and dazzling manner. End chapter. Dadang. Chapter 13. It was a slightly cloudy day, with a small cluster of dark clouds slowly drifting over hill. Xia Yula walked as he looked all around anxiously, afraid that Liao Jixiang wouldn't come. Following the narrow path they had trod on last time next to the vibrant bushes, Xia Yula found him. Liao Jixiang was wearing a plain white robe, sitting quietly on the sandy ground and playing with some pebbles beside his hands. Upon noticing Xia Yula, Liao Jixiang lowered his eyes and withdrew his hand from the stones, then he paused for a while before his next movement. It took him considerable effort as he struggled to stand up. Xia Yula didn't help him for fear of hurting his self-esteem, which was as fragile as shattered pottery. Liao Jixiang's legs were really uncooperative, as he staggered quite a few times while trying to get up. Struggling in front of Xia Yula made his face and neck turn glistening red. Xia Yula observed his embarrassment and guessed that Liao Jixiang must have been genuinely exhausted, so he had no choice but to sit down. He walked up to Liao Jixiang, circled around to get behind him, wanting to help him brush off the sandy soil from his robe. Yet Liao Jixiang was just like a timid little creature, cautiously following Xia Yula as he walked, turning whichever way Xia Yula turned. "Your robe is covered in sand," Xia Yula explained. Liao Jixiang randomly dusted his lower body. "Done," he said coldly, as if he didn't care much about his appearance. "Let's go." It was still the same old creek as last time, but the scenery looked slightly different due to the overcast sky. The foliage appeared greener and the wind felt fresher. From the back, Liao Jixiang looked somewhat ethereal and otherworldly. His figure seemed to be afloat in the wind, like a rustling pine branch, or a graceful white crane. There was an awkward silence between them, neither of them knew what to say with the unpleasant atmosphere from their last parting still lingering. Suddenly, Xia Yula spotted the same sour fruits growing by the roadside that they tasted last time, which were red and in the size of a fingernail. He immediately picked a branch, broke it off the tree and handed it over to Liao Jixiang, like a child eager to please an adult. Liao Jixiang stopped and turned his head slightly, with a branch of fruit hanging just above his shoulder. The strikingly red fruits provided a large contrast with his face, making it appear as white as freshly landed snow. He glanced a bit nervously at Xia Yula, then reached out to take the branch from him. Xia Yula was very happy about it, and while he was feeling giddy, he blurted out, "I thought you weren't coming." Liao Jixiang didn't respond. Feeling awkward, Xia Yula asked again, "Last time you mentioned that sometimes you would come here together with another person. That other person, is it Mei Azha?" Liao Jixiang immediately turned around and gazed at him guardedly, but Xia Yula looked straight into his eyes and said frankly, "You're very close with him, aren't you?" He inquired softly, "He's also close with Zheng Xian, Do you know? He had gone too far. Liao Jixiang thought to himself. However, he could tell the worry from his words and his tone. They call each other brothers, Xia Yule continued tattling, and dine at the same table. How do you know? Liao Jixiang asked. Xia Yule was caught off guard. He didn't want Liao Jixiang to know that he had attended Zheng Xian's banquet, afraid that Liao Jixiang would think he was close to that person. Liao Jixiang took one step closer. Did you hear that somewhere? Or did you see for yourself? Xia Yule lowered his head and refused to speak. Liao Jixiang took another step closer. He smelled strongly of milky scent today, which almost overwhelmed the scent of sandalwood he wore. Whatever he does, it's for me, Liao Jixiang said. Do you really trust him so? In that instant, Xia Yule felt as if the tip of his heart had been pinched violently. He remained in stubborn silence, feeling like his words spoken out of goodwill was taken as foolishness, which was actually fine by him. However, what mattered more was that Liao Jixiang's words made him seem like a troublemaker, trying to sow discord between him and Mei Azha. Presently, Liao Jixiang's hand, which was fair as snow, reached over and very tenderly brushed over his shoulder. Xia Yule's eyes eagerly followed the hand to his shoulder, and found a small wet patch on his clothing. He looked up. The sky was still overcast, but it had not yet rained. There was indeed no rain fallen on the mountain path, yet the verdant green in the misty view moistened thy clothes. Liao Jixiang recited with a faint smile on his face. Xia Yule felt that Liao Jixiang was trying to comfort him, like how an adult comforts a child, but his heart couldn't help but tremble with joy. He foolishly looked at Liao Jixiang, his gaze falling onto his eyes, mouth, and almost translucent earlobes. To him, Liao Jixiang was young and pure, yet he also appeared disenchanted by the world. Could he be 30 years old? At most 30 years old. 10 years of weathering in Gansu had wasted away most of his youthful days. Feeling uncomfortable from Xia Yule's gaze, Liao Jixiang turned his face away and wanted to continue walking. Yang Chun, Xia Yule called on him, pointing to the opposite bank of the stream. Have you been over there? The wind blew up his wide sleeves. Following the rising white fabric of sleeves in the wind, Liao Jixiang saw the bamboo forest on the opposite side of the creek, and the rooftops of the temple peeking at them from among the trees. He shook his head. There's no bridge. There are stones. Xia Yule was referring to the string of large white stones that Liao Jixiang didn't let him step on last time. We can step on them to cross. Liao Jixiang's face immediately turned pale. It took him a while to finally admit. I can't get across. For one person, that might be true. Xia Yule briefly looked over Liao Jixiang's frail left leg without unsettling his feelings. But there's two of us, no. Liao Jixiang was stunned, as if this was the very first time that he had ever heard such words. He was hesitating. So, Xia Yule simply took his sleeve in his hands and led him to the bank. Why didn't Xia Yule hold his hand instead of his sleeve? It wasn't like Liao Jixiang was a young unbetrothed girl. Xia Yule couldn't explain it. Perhaps to him, Liao Jixiang was neither a man nor a woman. The creek was slightly deeper than 3 days ago, and probably due to the cloudy weather, it looked turbulent. Xia Yule waded through the shallower waters and jumped onto one of the stones. The stones formed a continuous line, so it wasn't too difficult to cross. Within a few steps, Xia Yule arrived at the center of the stream, only to look back and find Liao Jixiang still remaining on the first big white stone, hesitating and caught between the dilemma of advancing or retreating. He wanted to follow Xia Yule, but he simply couldn't keep up. Xia Yule noticed his expression, which was a mixture of helplessness, confusion, embarrassment, and annoyance. He had left Liao Jixiang in an impossible situation. Immediately, Xia Yule went back to his side and heard Liao Jixiang, whose head lowered and muttering with irritation, "Never mind, Abu. Forgive my impudence." Xia Yule bent his knee, one of his hands lifting Liao Jixiang's hip, and the other supporting his waist. Very suddenly and swiftly, he lifted Liao Jixiang with a jolt. Liao Jixiang let out a scream of surprise, a genuine scream. He had never expected Xia Yulo to do this. It was a downright offense from a subordinate to his superior. He was held up so high in the air that he had to grab Xia Yulo's shoulders tightly. Like a swaying willow branch, over half of his body was closely pressed against Xia Yulo's, as if he was hugging Xia Yulo's head and neck in his arms. Holding Liao Jixiang was equally challenging for Xia Yulo. After all, he was carrying an adult, so his legs were not as agile. Afraid of shaking Liao Jixiang in his arms, he crossed the creek very slowly this time, which gradually drained his strength. Liao Jixiang was getting heavier and heavier, slipping from his hands inch by inch. Xia Yulo lifted him up again like he was holding a baby, gasping as he spoke, "Put your arms around me." Liao Jixiang looked at him awkwardly and didn't move. It was already late spring, so they were both dressed in thin layers of clothing. Liao Jixiang's slim waist, hips, and ribs were rubbing against Xia Yulo's sweaty palms through the thin fabrics. He was slipping even more, bringing the two of them almost face to face. Presently, Xia Yulo was too focused on his footing. They were reaching the other side in just 1 or 2 more stones, but when Xia Yulo abruptly tilted his head, he unexpectedly came face to face with Liao Jixiang's face. It was so close, frowning with fluttering eyelashes. Xia Yulo was struck by the beauty, lost his balance and missed his step, then fell into the water. This time, Liao Jixiang did as he was told and hugged Xia Yulo tightly. Yet Xia Yulo didn't allow it. Instead, he insisted on holding Liao Jixiang straight up, refusing to let the water wet Liao Jixiang for even a little bit, although half of his own body was already drenched in the water. Despite his efforts, Liao Jixiang's feet were soaked. His body hung on Xia Yulo's and wiped his face with the back of his hand, which was covered by water droplets. "Why was I so foolish," he complained, "to follow you and do something so stupid and absurd?" Xia Yulo felt ridiculous too, so he, being miserably drenched, carried Liao Jixiang carefully over and placed him safely on the bank. Seeing that he was able to stand still, Xia Yulo finally let go of his wet hug. The two of them stood there for a while, facing each other speechlessly, then suddenly burst into laughter together. "What are we to do now?" Liao Jixiang asked. "It's fine, only your shoes are wet," Xia Yulo replied. Liao Jixiang had a shy expression on his face. "I meant about you." "Oh." Xia Yulo was finally looking down at himself. His clothing was completely soaked from the knee level, and having the long robe wrapped around his leg was extremely uncomfortable. As he raised his eyes, he saw the sun breaking through the clouds and had an idea: take them off and let them dry. Liao Jixiang immediately checked their surroundings. "Nonsense." But Xia Yulo had already taken off his shoes. "It's all right, we're both men." Liao Jixiang watched as he removed his socks and rolled up his pants. As he untied his outer robe, he also placed his shoes and socks on the big rock to dry. Liao Jixiang stood still, panicking and twisting his fingers in anxiety. "Take off your shoes." Xia Yulo approached him in his loose undergarment, with a sincere and silly grin on his face. "It'll be so comfortable." Liao Jixiang was very reluctant. After pondering on it for a while, he took the effort to sit down on the ground, similar to how he struggled to stand up. Then he revealed his feet, which were in satin shoes, silk stockings, and they were not large. He started to take off his shoes. "I'm literally looking for trouble by coming here to meet you," he softly complained like a nagging woman. "Both the last time and this time." Xia Yulo heard it but didn't swallow his pride. "So, do you feel happier by restraining yourself, half dead, in the weaving and sewing bureau all day long?" Liao Jixiang immediately raised his eyebrows and gave him a fierce glare, but Xia Yulo couldn't care any less. He sat down right next to Liao Jixiang and watched him slowly removing his socks. Liao Jixiang had a pair of fair feet, which were now wet and shiny. Under the grayish sunlight from the cloudy sky, they appeared to be made of ivory, making him want to feel them. The mere thought of feeling them up made Xia Yulu too ashamed to keep staring. Liao Jixiang seemed to be bothered by his extremely fair feet too, but because he had nowhere to hide them, he curled up his toes in embarrassment. Yet for reasons unknown to him, when he curled his toes up, Xia Yulu felt that this pair of feet were even more appealing to his heart, so he couldn't help but steal glances at them. Liao Jixiang caught him looking and scolded him, "What are you looking at?" Although he was uttering a reproachful sentence, his voice was trembling. Are a eunuch's feet so good looking? Perhaps due to the previous incident, they had formed a deeper understanding now, so Xia Yulu wasn't very affected by his anger. They are so fair, he now dared to say anything, that they look like a woman's. The sentence wasn't finished, but it was as if both of them heard it. I made the same blunder again. Xia Yulu pressed his forehead in frustration and helplessly lay back on the sand. I can't seem to watch my mouth. My bad. Liao Jixiang went silent for a moment, but he didn't get angry. He turned over to look at Xia Yulu. You haven't told anyone about our meeting, have you? No. Xia Yulu rested his head on his hand, lazily gazing at Liao Jixiang's back. Hearing his reply, Liao Jixiang felt relieved and turned his back towards Xia Yulu, but just as he was doing so, he heard Xia Yulu saying, I know you mean well. Though he couldn't see, Xia Yulu could feel Liao Jixiang smiling. You're thinking too much, Liao Jixiang replied. In fact, I told a colleague. Liao Jixiang immediately turned back, staring at him incredulously. A colleague? His tone was now completely different, revealing his hidden side, which was resolute and ruthless. What a fool! He was so peculiarly incensed, that even his fingertips were trembling. If he tells others about it, everyone will be convinced that you've joined the eunuch's faction. Your entire life will be finished. Xia Yulu completed the sentence for him, staring at him without blinking even once. There was even a grin on his face. That was how Liao Jixiang immediately found out he was being teased, so he angrily turned his back on Xia Yulu. Xia Yulu eagerly followed to grab his sleeve, but Liao Jixiang pulled his hand away. So, Xia Yulu pulled on his sleeves again, to which Liao Jixiang still remained coldly indifferent. Eventually, Xia Yulu exerted a greater force and dragged him down, making him lie next to him. Liao Jixiang lowered his eyes and refused to speak. To lighten his mood, Xia Yulu deliberately laughed softly, but at this moment, Liao Jixiang whispered, Don't let me. What? Xia Yulu couldn't make the words out, so he leaned in. It was too close. Liao Jixiang lifted his eyes, his pure eyes filled with shallow ripples of light as he avoided Xia Yulu's gaze restlessly. Don't let me drag you down, he said, ever so cautiously and timidly. Don't ruin your own reputation. Xia Yulu was almost blurting out, when you cut down the dwarf pear trees, did you ever think about your reputation? Liao Jixiang didn't expect him to bring this up. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he ultimately remained silent. You always think about others, but what about yourself? Xia Yulu was pressing for an answer. Liao Jixiang shifted backwards to create some space between them. What reputation do eunuchs need? He said dispassionately, eunuchs are destined to be damned in this world. Xia Yulu couldn't stand his words, so every time Liao Jixiang retreated, he advanced closer. People only curse the evil eunuchs. Liao Jixiang stopped retreating and faced Xia Yulu head on. Then tell me, what's a good eunuch to you? It was a question that Xia Yulu couldn't answer, so their argument reached an impasse. Liao Jixiang mocked himself, his lips quivering. Of all of you scholars, who would remember a eunuch's kindness? Just exchanging a few words with us makes you look like you're losing your life. You and us. They were so close to each other that their breaths were almost intertwined, but Xiaoyula was convinced that he felt an invisible line separating them brutally. Don't say that. Clenching his fists, Xiaoyula looked at Liao Jixiang, his eyes full of plea. It hurts me when you say that. Remember, Liao Jixiang slowly turned over, cold and distantly, he left his back to Xiaoyula. Don't ever have anything to do with eunuchs, never. Xiaoyula felt as if he had a huge rock pressing against his chest, he was breathing strenuously. Reaching out, he sensed the extreme urge to grab that shoulder and make him turn back. Yet in the end, he didn't really possess the courage to do so. End chapter. Dang. Chapter 14. Xiaoyula returned to the city in his wet clothes, and all the pedestrians avoided him as he walked in the street. Yet he didn't care about them at all, because his mind was completely occupied by Liao Jixiang's words. Walking while thinking about Liao Jixiang's meekness when meeting with him, he suddenly seemed to spot a familiar object in the crowd. With a casual glance around, an iron chain made up of thick links, dangling heavily and swaying in the air. His eyes followed the chain up, and landed on the person holding onto the chain, who was not the disheveled old beggar. Rather, it was a teenage boy wearing a yesa. It was Alio carrying a long sword on his back. Xiaoyula stood there dumbfounded, but all of a sudden, he was enlightened. That pair of old beggars had probably already become ghosts under this boy's long sword. Indeed, how could Liao Jixiang tolerate their obscene insults? His temporary forbearance was nothing but a prelude to a merciless execution. This was not the first time after all. Xiaoyula's hand went to his neck and felt for the shallow scar there, which was still not fully healed. Inadvertently, he shuddered. It was incredibly difficult to reconcile the two versions of the man he witnessed for himself. These two figures, Liao Jixiang from the Weaving and Sewing Bureau, and Liao Yangchun from Liao Manpo, were just like two balls of mercury, one black and one white, impossible to fuse into one no matter how close they were. Alio didn't see Xiaoyula. He was walking with Ruan Dian, who threw his arm around Alio's shoulder as they headed towards Qiandao Bridge along Jiajing Avenue. Dugong only prefers you little ones. Ruan Dian kept his back extremely straight, as if he didn't dare to bend it for even just a little bit. You couldn't even kill Xiaoyula, yet Dugong still didn't punish you. Alio blinked his big eyes, and glanced at him impassively. Ruan Dian was tired of maintaining his posture, so he slightly relaxed his back, and the moment he relaxed, the whip wounds on his back immediately came into contact with his clothes, making him cry out in pain. Dugong is only merciless towards me. Who told you to extort money from the common folks? Alio shook the iron chain in his hand, which was his fresh spoil of war. With his other hand, he gestured his thoughts at Ruan Dian, who waved him off in annoyance. Fine, fine, he whined. What? Can't I get some extra income? I'm just a damned eunuch, what achievements do you want me to accomplish? Alio didn't care to argue with him, so he focused on playing with his chain. He had just gotten hold of it, so his attention was still drawn strongly to this new possession. When he lashed it in the air, it made a swoosh sound in the wind. Presently, there was a sudden commotion ahead of them, and it sounded like someone was arguing. Ruan Dian withdrew his arm around Alio's shoulder and went to check on it first. Shaking his arm, Alio wrapped the chain around his wrist, then followed him. Qiandao Bridge was a bustling place where the prostitutes, their clients, and stall vendors all crowded together, so it could be counted as part of the busy main road. As such, there was always something happening around here. This time, it was a pair of junior eunuchs leading some soldiers, blocking the passing clients and demanding money. People in Nanjing were rational. The young and the old all crowded together, each demanding an explanation from them. 5 taels of silver per person is no small amount. Won't even need that much to hire a Yangzhou girl. That's too much. The leader of the junior eunuchs was delicate looking and spoke in a soft voice, our Lord Qi is a special imperial envoy appointed by the emperor. It is the utmost honor for him to come to Nanjing. Don't say 5 taels, he sneered, if we demand 50 taels, you'll need to surrender that money even if that means to gut yourself and take out your intestines. The crowd was in an uproar, and several brave men tried to advance but the soldiers pinned them down without warning. Look, Ruandian showed Aliu a thumbs up. People from the capital are truly mighty. And so people began to pay. Once they paid, they were left with no money to spend on prostitution, so they ended up walking back dirty and daunted. All of a sudden, someone in the crowd chanted out loud, "There is infinite gold in the world, yet finite means to ascend to heaven. We advise you to be forgiving in all matters. Suppose you gather wealth and obtain power through unfair means, your sons will suffer, so will your grandsons. Where would eunuchs get sons and grandsons?" Not to mention the 2 junior eunuchs under Qi Wan, even Ruandian was furious upon hearing it. Before the soldiers could react, he drew his sword and charged over, shouting, "Who sang it?" He aggressively pulled the common folks and demanded, "Show yourself." Nobody knew who it was given the messy scene. The common folks were terrified and knelt down in unison, begging for mercy. He ran away. He's from the Yang Society. Yang Society. Ruandian felt like he had heard of it before but he wasn't sure of it, so he turned to look at Aliu, who was still swaying the iron chain like he was playing. Aliu lifted his chin towards him, so Ruandian put away his long knife and shouted, "Get lost," granting the common folks leave. Yang Society. Aliu had heard May Azah mention it before. It was a group of stinky scholars who established this shabby faction, which had a sole purpose of composing lousy and sarcastic poems to mock the eunuchs like them. And May Azah seemed to possess a list of the members' names. "Who are the members of this society, do you know?" Ruandian asked him. Aliu knew a few, so he nodded. Ruandian licked his lips cunningly and said, "Good, we'll teach them a lesson someday." They entered a brothel called Zushi. Although Qi Wan's subordinates didn't take any money from them, they chatted a bit about this and that. Ruandian was very good at socializing. After a while, the 2 junior eunuchs were addressing him as Xiong. "See that?" As they turned into the narrow alley of courtesans' quarters, Ruandian told Aliu, "Remember how I did it? If one day I'm not around no more, you have to be able to handle it on your own." The moment Aliu heard the words "not around," he immediately covered Ruandian's mouth. He had a strong grip, which hurt Ruandian's jaw badly but he was happy, rubbing Aliu's head like he was petting a puppy. "I'm here, little brother. I'll always be here. We'll die together." Aliu blushed and lowered his head shyly, then opened his mouth and pointed to his throat. "You can't speak, so what?" Ruandian didn't say it out loud but deep down he was feeling even worse than Aliu. "Wait for me, little brother. When I gather enough money, I'll find the best doctor for you." "Forget it." Aliu gestured. "You squandered all your money to that woman." He was referring to the woman residing here, where they were presently heading towards, a small wooden building where she received her clients. Her name was Wang Lu'er, and like most of the mediocre Nanjing prostitutes, her stage name was derived from the character for beauty. Lu'er. As Ruandian went upstairs, he shouted, using his tongue-rolling Beijing accent. The voice from upstairs soon responded, "Oh, so you still remember the way here." Aliu didn't like the woman, nor did he like being in here. As soon as he entered the room, he squatted down by the threshold. Because of him blocking the doorway, the young courtesans waiting on Wang Lu'er could only serve her tea by brushing against him as she entered the door, similar to how she walked past a puppy. Upon entering her room, Ruandian tore his collar open and exposed half of his chest and arm like an uncouth barbarian. On his thick arm was a patch of rough and pockmarked skin, which was known as a tattoo from burning incense, marking the characters for Wang Lu'er. With this tattoo, they were considered a couple. And at the moment, they were whispering sweet nothings to each other sitting by the bed. After talking for a while, Ruan Dian called out to Aliou, "Come on, let's get you to the small room." Aliou refused to go, so Ruan Dian had to pull him along. The tea-serving young prostitute went past them and headed towards the small room first, but she gave Aliou a fierce glare before her figure disappeared into the room. Aliou was a little scared of her and Ruan Dian was aware of it. "Get up. You don't look like a man at all." He softly scolded Aliou, "Why, you don't even blink when killing someone or chopping off their hands, but a little girl like her can make you go soft." Aliou reluctantly gestured to his heart with his hand and shook his index finger. "I don't like her." This was the last thing Ruan Dian had patience to hear. "You like Guo Xiaozhou, but has he ever set eyes on you?" he cursed. "Besides, what's so good about him? He has a cock, but it's useless. His behind is probably poked so many times that it's already rotten." Aliou stood up with a sullen face, so Ruan Dian's tone softened. "Try a woman. Once you've had a taste of her, you wouldn't like him anymore. I've already arranged everything for you. All you need to do is to take off your clothes and get in the bed." With that, he patted Aliou on the shoulder, like a real big brother. "Conquer her. Everyone needs to pass this test." Aliou was pulled into the small room by him. The young prostitute had already removed all her clothes and was lying naked in bed. She had a copper pipe in her hand, for smoking some Guangzhou tobacco. Seeing that made Aliou think to himself that the tobacco must have been paid for by his brother. Ruan Dian moved a chair by the door and took a seat. "Go on," he urged, "hurry up." Aliou reluctantly removed all his clothes and climbed onto the bed, revealing his small, dark buttocks. He lifted the blankets and dumbly straddled the naked young prostitute. She immediately glared at him fiercely, then she looked down. Down there, Aliou's penis appeared immature, soft, and flaccid. Even though he was about 15 years old, his thing was like that of a 7 or 8-year-old boy. In fact, when he was exactly around that age, he and several hundred other poor children all had their testicles removed, and then they were dispatched across Pingxiang City. Aliou grabbed his little thing and foolishly thrust it between the young prostitute's thighs. Ruan Dian enthusiastically instructed him, kiss her on the lips first." Aliou looked at him, then back at the young prostitute. He then worked up the courage to give a messy and blunt kiss on that pair of tender, rouged lips. The young prostitute put on an irritated look, but something about her seemed to be different now. Aliou couldn't tell what had changed, but he could feel her body relaxing, like a soft cloud expanding around him, and was somewhat affectionate, too. End chapter. ***** Note. During the Ming Dynasty, castration was done in two ways: Quanbei, which was to remove both the penis and the testicles; Banbei, which only removed the testicles.